The flashing red and blue lights cut through the quiet night, bouncing off the brick walls of small businesses that had long since closed. The air smelled faintly of fried chicken and exhaust, the kind of mix you only got in certain corners of the city where life never fully went to sleep. A black man sat behind the wheel of a sleek black SUV, his hands resting calmly on the steering wheel, his expression unreadable. He knew how this would go the moment he saw the cruiser tail him. He'd been here before, too many times. But tonight, it wasn't going to end the way the officer thought it would. License and registration? The cop barked as soon as he strutted up to the window. His voice was laced with arrogance, the kind that came from a man who wore his badge like it made him king of the block. He was young, maybe late 20s, with a shaved head and a jaw clenched so tight you could hear his teeth grinding. The man in the SUV slowly lowered his window. "Evening, officer. May I ask what I was pulled over for?" His voice was calm, smooth, but carried weight. It was the kind of voice that had commanded rooms, courtrooms, and entire operations. But this cop didn't know that. Not yet. The officer smirked, leaning down so his flashlight beam cut across the man's face. "You were driving suspiciously." He dragged out the word like it meant something. "Out here? This late in a car like this?" "Yeah, you fit the type." The man let out a slow breath through his nose, steadying himself. "The type," he repeated, the words quiet but sharp. He knew exactly what the officer meant. Black, successful looking, out of place in the cop's narrow view of the world. "Step out of the vehicle," the cop ordered, tapping the side of the door with his flashlight. Now, the man didn't move right away. Instead, he looked at the officer with a cool stare that made the younger man shift, just slightly, though he covered it with another smirk. Finally, the man unbuckled his seatbelt, stepped out, and stood tall under the glow of the street lamp. He wasn't bulky, but there was something about his posture, his straight back, the way he carried himself, that spoke of power, authority, the kind the officer wasn't used to seeing from someone who looked like him. "What's your name?" the cop asked, pulling out a small pad like he was about to make a note, though he didn't write anything. The man tilted his head. "Why don't you tell me yours first?" The officer narrowed his eyes. "I'm the one asking the questions." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the idling cruiser. Then the man smiled faintly, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that said you have no idea what you're walking into. "You really don't want to go down this road, officer," he said evenly. The cop bristled. "Is that a threat?" The man shook his head once. "No, it's advice." But the officer didn't take advice. He puffed up his chest, trying to assert control. "Hands on the hood. Now, don't make me tell you again." The man's jaw flexed, his calm beginning to crack. He glanced around the street. Empty. Quiet. He knew how quickly things could go wrong. He'd seen enough innocent men gunned down on corners just like this one because someone with a badge thought they were judge, jury, and executioner. He'd spent his whole life fighting against that. But this time the fight had walked right up to him. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his hands on the hood of his SUV. The metal was still warm under his palms. The officer patted him down roughly, more aggressively than necessary, like he wanted to humiliate him. The man stayed still, biting back the anger burning in his chest. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the most dangerous weapon wasn't fists or guns, it was patience. When the officer reached into his jacket pocket without asking, the man's voice finally hardened. "Careful, you don't want to do that." The cop froze, pulling back just slightly. "What, you hiding something? Drugs? Gun?" The man straightened up slowly, turning to face him. His eyes locked on the officer's with a calm that was almost chilling. "No," he said softly. "What I have in that pocket would change your whole life. Your career. Everything." He let the words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. The officer scoffed, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. He wasn't used to this. He wasn't used to being the one unsettled. He shoved his flashlight into the man's chest, trying to reassert himself. "You think you're somebody? You think I won't haul you in right now?" The man leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. I know you don't want to find out who I am. For a long beat, they stared at each other, the tension thick enough to choke on. The man could see the cop's bravado slipping, replaced by the first hints of doubt. He knew the officer wouldn't back down, not yet. But he also knew the tables were already starting to turn. Then the man stepped back, slid his wallet out, and held it open just enough for the badge inside to gleam under the streetlight. The FBI insignia caught the light like a shard of steel. The officer froze, his mouth opening but no words coming out. The man's voice was calm again, but this time there was fire behind it. Now you know who you just put your hands on. The cop swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. For the first time that night, he didn't have anything to say, and that was only the beginning. For a long, brittle moment, the young cop just stood there staring at the badge. His flashlight slipped in his hand, beam trembling against the pavement. The arrogance that had been dripping from his voice minutes earlier evaporated, replaced by something he didn't quite know how to name. Fear, panic, maybe both. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. The man, Agent Marcus Reed, didn't flinch. He held the badge steady in the glow of the streetlight, his hazel eyes locked on the officer with an intensity that made the air heavy. Marcus had been in interrogation rooms where criminals twice his size had folded under that same stare. But this wasn't a suspect. This was supposed to be a cop sworn to protect and serve. Instead, the kid had chosen to profile and harass. Now, Marcus said finally, his voice low, measured, controlled. You want to explain to me what gave you probable cause to stop me? The officer blinked rapidly, sweat gathering at the edges of his hairline. I thought you were suspicious. His voice cracked on the last word, suddenly flimsy. Driving around here, this time of night. Suspicious, Marcus repeated, his tone cutting through like glass. He snapped his wallet shut and slid it back into his jacket pocket. That's the second time you've used that word tonight. Tell me, was it my car you found suspicious, or was it me? The cop's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. He didn't answer, and that silence said more than words ever could. Marcus stepped closer, just enough to make the officer retreat a step without realizing it. You humiliated me. You laid your hands on me. You accused me of being a criminal because of the color of my skin. His voice rose slightly now, but it was still controlled, sharp as a blade. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? The cop shook his head faintly, though his eyes betrayed him. He knew exactly who he was dealing with now. A federal agent. And not just any federal agent. Marcus Reed was the kind of man whose name carried weight in Washington, D.C., whose work had shut down trafficking rings and terrorist plots. But the officer had seen none of that. All he'd seen was a black man in a nice car at night. That was enough for him to draw his own twisted conclusions. Sir, I didn't know, the cop stammered, his voice dropping in volume. I wasn't trying to. Didn't know? Marcus cut him off sharply. That's the problem. You never cared to know. You saw me and made your judgment in seconds. You don't get to undo that with an apology. The officer's mouth opened, then closed again. His breathing grew shallow, his cocky posture deflating. For the first time, he looked small, but Marcus wasn't interested in breaking him down. He wanted accountability. He wanted the truth spoken out loud. What's your name? Marcus demanded, his tone commanding now, like he was back briefing a SWAT team. The officer hesitated. I'm Officer Mills. Marcus repeated it slowly, committing it to memory. Officer Mills. Good. Because tomorrow morning, that name is going to be on my desk. And maybe the desk of your captain too. Mills' eyes widened, panic flickering across his face. Sir, please. Don't report this. I didn't mean any harm. I was just doing my job. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Your job is to protect, not harass, not abuse, not profile men who look like me because your imagination runs wild after dark. What you did tonight could have cost someone their life. You understand that? Mills nodded quickly, his voice nearly a whisper now. Yes, sir. I understand. But Marcus could tell he didn't. Not really. Mills wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he'd been caught. That was the difference. And it was exactly why Marcus couldn't just let this slide. He'd seen too many like Mills. Too many officers who got a slap on the wrist and went right back out on the street to ruin another life. Still, Marcus didn't move right away. His mind was buzzing. Part of him wanted to drag this rookie back to his captain right now. Make a scene. Make sure every officer in the precinct knew exactly what happened. But another part of him wanted to teach Mills something deeper than humiliation. Something that might stick. Marcus took a long breath, then said slowly, "I'm giving you a choice tonight, Officer Mills. Either I walk away and report you to your captain first thing in the morning, or you show me you're capable of learning something before this night is over." Mills blinked, confused. "Learn, sir? What do you mean?" Marcus's gaze hardened. "You're going to ride with me for 1 hour. You're going to see what real law enforcement looks like. No bias, no power trips, just service. Then you're going to decide if you're cut out for this badge you're wearing." Mills' jaw dropped. "Ride with you?" He looked around as if someone might jump out and tell him it was a prank. "But I don't think I can." Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled the air. "You don't have a choice. Because right now, Officer Mills, your career is dangling by a thread. And I'm the one holding the scissors." Mills' face drained of color, his shoulders slumping. He nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. I'll go." Marcus straightened, his voice firm. "Good. Get in." Mills hesitated, then climbed reluctantly into the passenger seat of Marcus's SUV. The irony wasn't lost on him. Moments ago, he was frisking this man like a criminal. Now he was sitting beside him, silent and nervous, waiting for whatever came next. Marcus slid back into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled onto the quiet street. For a while, the only sound was the low hum of the tires on asphalt. Mills shifted uncomfortably, staring out the window, his thoughts racing. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, his jaw set. He hadn't planned on this tonight, but maybe fate had handed him an opportunity. Maybe this was the moment to show one man what justice was supposed to look like. And maybe, just maybe, it was the start of something bigger. As they drove deeper into the night, neither of them knew that the call coming across Marcus's secure line in the next 10 minutes would change everything. The SUV glided through the dimly lit streets, its engine purring softly against the silence. Officer Mills sat stiff in the passenger seat, his hands fidgeting in his lap. Every so often, he stole a glance at Marcus, but the agent's eyes stayed on the road, calm and focused, as if he was waiting for something to happen. Mills' heartbeat hadn't slowed since that badge flashed in his face. He'd gone from swaggering in control to feeling like a rookie cadet who'd just been caught cheating on an exam. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. Not his personal cell, the secure line. The kind of line that only rang when it mattered. He pressed a button on the dashboard, and a clipped female voice filled the car. "Agent Reed, we've got a situation. A suspected trafficking van was spotted leaving a warehouse on 42nd. We've lost visual. Last known heading east toward the river. Units are stretched thin. Can you intercept?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Copy that. I'm on it." He clicked the line off and flicked on the SUV's sirens, the hidden ones that came with his clearance. Red and blue washed over the street again, but this time with authority Marcus had actually earned. Mills flinched at the sound. What was that?" he asked, voice cracking. "That," Marcus said, pulling a sharp turn, "is your lesson for the night arriving sooner than expected." Mills blinked. "Wait, you're not actually going after them, are you?" "That's federal work. I can't." "You can, and you will." Marcus cut him off, his voice like stone. "You wanted to play cop tonight, Officer Mills. Congratulations. You just got a front row seat to the real thing." The SUV sped through intersections, slicing past red lights with precision. Marcus drove like a man who knew every street, every shortcut, his focus razor sharp. Mills gripped the handle on the door, his earlier bravado completely gone. I don't even know what we're walking into." "That's the point," Marcus replied. his voice steady but urgent. Law enforcement isn't about pulling over cars you think look suspicious. It's about putting yourself on the line when real danger shows up. You scared of being uncomfortable, Mills? Good. You should be. That's where the job starts. Mills swallowed hard, staring out the window as the scenery blurred. His mind spun. Trafficking van? Interception? This wasn't what he signed up for. He thought the badge meant respect, meant control. Nobody told him it also meant riding shotgun into something that could get him killed. Minutes later, Marcus cut the lights and slowed as they approached an industrial strip near the river. The warehouses loomed like silent giants, their windows dark, graffiti sprawled across their walls. It was the kind of place nobody looked twice at, which made it perfect for the kind of business Marcus hunted. There, Marcus said sharply, pointing ahead. A beat-up white van rolled down the street. No plates on the back. Its windows were blacked out. Too black for anything legal. Marcus's pulse quickened. That's them? Mills whispered, his throat dry. That's them, Marcus confirmed. His eyes flicked to Mills for the first time since the call. You keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. Understood? Mills nodded quickly. Marcus trailed the van at a careful distance, his lights still off. The van turned down a side street near the docks. Marcus eased the SUV closer, parking just out of sight behind a stack of shipping containers. He killed the engine, and silence pressed in. The van rolled to a stop. Two men climbed out, big, burly, the type you didn't mistake for warehouse workers. One lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dark. The other checked the back doors of the van, glancing around like he was making sure nobody was watching. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. They're moving people tonight. Probably kids. That van could be full of them. Mill's stomach dropped. Kids? Are you serious? Deadly serious, Marcus said, his eyes locked on the van. Now you understand why profiling men in cars doesn't make this world safer. The real predators don't look like me. They look like them. He jerked his chin toward the smugglers by the van. Mills felt his throat close. He'd signed up to catch speeders, write tickets, feel important on the block. He hadn't signed up for this. And yet here he was, staring at a crime so ugly it made his earlier actions feel like a bad joke. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt. Stay here. If I don't give the signal, you don't move. Clear? Mills shook his head rapidly. Wait, what if they see you? What if? Marcus shot him a look so sharp it cut through his panic. Clear? Yes, sir. Mills mumbled, shrinking into the seat. Marcus slid out silently, moving like a shadow along the side of the containers. His movements were precise, practiced. He'd done this too many times to count. He edged closer, listening. The burly men by the van muttered to each other, their voices carrying just enough in the quiet night. Marcus caught pieces. Drop off. 5 more minutes. Keep them quiet. His chest tightened. They had kids in there, all right. Back in the SUV, Mill's palms were sweaty against his knees. He couldn't see everything, but he saw enough to know Marcus was walking straight into something real. His pulse thundered in his ears. For the first time in his short career, Mills understood what danger really was. Not imagined danger, not excuses written on traffic tickets. Actual danger, and he wasn't ready. Then, suddenly, a sound cracked the night. Not a gunshot yet. A child's cry. High-pitched, muffled, coming from inside the van. Marcus froze mid-step, his blood turning hot. That sound, small, scared, was all the confirmation he needed. He lifted his hand, giving a subtle signal toward the SUV. Mills leaned forward, heart hammering. He didn't know what the signal meant. Was it stay? Was it go? His chest rose and fell rapidly, panic clawing at him. The men by the van stiffened at the sound too. One barked at the other. Shut them up. He yanked the van's door open, and Marcus finally saw the truth. Inside, crowded on the floor, were at least half a dozen kids. Their wide eyes glistened in the dark, faces streaked with fear and dirt. Marcus's jaw clenched. His hand slipped to his sidearm. This was it. And then, from the SUV, Officer Mills fumbled. His nerves got the best of him. He accidentally leaned on the horn. The blaring sound shattered the silence, echoing through the docks like a siren. The traffickers' heads snapped up. Their eyes locked straight onto Marcus. Guns came up. The night exploded. Date's horn's blare echoed through the night like a death knell. Marcus's stomach dropped the second he heard it. He didn't need to turn back to know what happened. Mills, the rookie, had just blown their cover. The two traffickers jerked toward the sound, their faces twisting in alarm. One shouted, "We're made," as he reached under his jacket. Metal glinted in the dim light. Marcus's instincts kicked in faster than thought. His weapon was already in his hands. "Drop it," Marcus barked, his voice sharp, commanding, the kind of tone that froze hardened criminals in their tracks. But these men weren't the type to freeze. One fired, the bullet sparking against the shipping container inches from Marcus's shoulder. Marcus dove for cover, heart pounding but focus unshaken. He'd been in firefights before. This wasn't new. What was new was the wild card cowering in the SUV behind him. He didn't have the luxury of dealing with Mills' fear right now. Survival came first. Gunfire cracked the night again. Marcus rolled, returned fire, and clipped the smoker's arm, sending his pistol clattering onto the pavement. The man howled in pain, clutching his shoulder. The other shouted curses and fired wildly, bullets ricocheting off metal. From the SUV, Mills' voice rang out, high-pitched and panicked. "Agent Reed, what do I do?" Marcus gritted his teeth, pressing his back against cold steel. "Stay down and shut up," he snapped. The last thing he needed was Mills running into the line of fire. But the crying from the van grew louder now. The children's voices pierced through the chaos, terrified, pleading. Marcus felt a surge of heat in his chest. He couldn't let them get caught in this crossfire. He peeked out, lined up his shot, and squeezed. The second man's gun spun out of his grip, sparks flying as it skidded across the pavement. Marcus was up on his feet in an instant, moving fast. He slammed the first trafficker against the van, disarming him completely, then pivoted to the second and drove his knee into the man's gut, dropping him like a sack of bricks. Both men hit the ground groaning, weapons out of reach. Marcus kept his gun trained on them, his breathing steady despite the rush of adrenaline. Then he barked, "Mills, get out here." The SUV door creaked open slowly, and Mills stumbled out, his face pale, eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. He looked at the groaning traffickers on the ground, then at Marcus standing tall, weapon still raised, and he swallowed hard. "You see this?" Marcus snapped, his voice sharp with fury. "This is what happens when you panic, when you don't respect the job. You almost got me killed. You almost got those kids killed." Mills' mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. His throat bobbed as he tried to form an apology, but Marcus wasn't interested. Not now. He jerked his chin at the van. "Get those doors open." Mills hesitated, then hurried to the back of the van. His hands trembled as he pulled the doors wide. The children inside flinched, recoiling at the sudden movement. Their faces were streaked with dirt, some with dried tears. They couldn't have been more than 10 years old, the oldest maybe 12. Mills froze, his breath catching. He'd never seen anything like this. His mind couldn't wrap around the reality that these kids were packed in like cargo, terrified, waiting to be shipped off to God knows where. Marcus's voice softened slightly, just enough for the children. "It's okay. You're safe now. We're here to help." He lowered his weapon, keeping it visible but not threatening, and took a careful step toward them. His tone was steady, the kind of voice that cut through fear like a warm blanket. The kids looked at him with wide, trembling eyes, unsure if they could believe it. But then one, a little girl with tangled braids, whispered, "Are you a cop?" Marcus nodded once. "Better. FBI." He gave her the smallest smile he could muster. "Nobody's gonna hurt you again." The girl's lip quivered, and then she launched forward, wrapping her tiny arms around his waist. Marcus's chest tightened, and for a moment, the weight of the world pressed harder on him. This was why he did it. why he put on the badge every morning. Not for power, not for control, for them. Behind him, Mills was frozen, staring at the scene like his brain had short-circuited. He'd spent his career pulling over cars, puffing his chest out at civilians, thinking he was tough. But this was the real thing, and he had almost ruined it. Marcus turned to him sharply. "Call it in. Now." Mills jolted, fumbling for his radio. His voice shook as he relayed the location, requesting backup, medical assistance, child services, everything. Marcus listened, his jaw tight, his mind already moving 10 steps ahead. The traffickers groaned on the ground, one clutching his arm, the other wheezing for breath. Marcus kept his gun steady on them, his eyes hard. "You're going away for a long time," he said coldly. "And when I testify, I'll make sure you never see the light of day again." The men spat curses at him, but Marcus didn't flinch. He'd faced worse. Minutes ticked by, the night air thick with tension until the distant wail of sirens began to rise. Backup was coming. The situation would be under control soon. Marcus finally lowered his weapon, holstering it with a calm precision that made Mills' chest tighten. He realized something in that moment, that he was standing next to a man who was everything he wasn't. Brave, composed, truly protective of the people he served, and he had disrespected him, humiliated him, treated him like less than human. The shame hit him harder than any lecture ever could. When the first squad car screeched into the lot, lights flashing, officers poured out, weapons drawn, Marcus raised his hand, showing his badge with a sharp command. "Stand down. FBI." The officers hesitated, then lowered their weapons. They quickly moved to cuff the traffickers and secure the scene. Child services vans weren't far behind. As the children were carefully let out, wrapped in blankets and reassured with soft voices, Marcus stood off to the side, his arms folded. His face was calm, but inside, his chest still burned from the adrenaline. Mills approached him slowly, guilt etched across his features. "Agent Reed, I'm sorry. I screwed up." His voice cracked with sincerity this time. "I almost got you killed. I almost got them killed." Marcus's gaze flicked to him, steady and piercing. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, his voice came low, firm, but not without weight. "Yeah, you did. And that's something you're going to live with. Question is, are you going to learn from it? Or are you going to keep playing cop until somebody ends up in a body bag?" Mills swallowed hard, his eyes stinging. "I'll learn." Marcus didn't smile. He just nodded once, then turned back to watch the kids being loaded safely into the vans. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. Tonight was only the beginning. The night bled into dawn. The docks lit now not by moonlight, but by the pulsing red and blue of squad cars. Reporters had already caught wind of the bust, their cameras flashing from a distance as children wrapped in blankets were carried into child services vans. Marcus stood tall, arms crossed, watching every move like a hawk. His face betrayed nothing, but his eyes tracked everything. The evidence being bagged, the traffickers being dragged into cruisers, Mills standing off to the side with his head down like a schoolboy waiting for detention. The captain of the local precinct finally arrived, his heavy boots clapping against the concrete. Captain Harris was broad, balding, with a voice that could fill a football field. He spotted Marcus instantly, his eyes widening at the sight of the badge. "Agent Reed?" he asked, his tone both respectful and wary. Marcus gave a curt nod. "FBI, field office out of D.C. The captain's expression tightened as he turned toward Mills, who stood rigidly by his cruiser, sweat dripping down his temple. "Mills," Harris growled, his voice laced with disappointment. "What in God's name were you doing out here?" Mills' throat bobbed. "Sir, Marcus cut him off, his voice calm but sharp. "He pulled me over. No reason. Profiling. He laid his hands on me, harassed me, and then followed it up by almost blowing an active federal operation." A hush fell over the gathered officers. Harris's jaw worked as he processed Marcus's words. His glare at Mills could have melted steel. "You did what?" Mills stammered, his words tumbling out. Sir, I didn't know. He was FBI. I didn't. That's the problem. Marcus snapped, his tone slicing through the excuses. You didn't care to know. You just saw me and made your judgment. The silence was deafening. Every cop within earshot shifted uncomfortably, some looking down, others staring hard at Mills like he'd dragged them all into his shame. Captain Harris's face flushed red. Mills, you're done. Badge now. Mills' eyes went wide. Sir, please, Badge, Harris barked, his voice thunderous. Mills' hands shook as he unclipped the badge from his chest. He held it out like it weighed 100 pounds, his eyes darting toward Marcus. The shame carved into his face was deeper than anything he'd ever felt. But Marcus didn't take the badge. Instead, he stared at Mills with that same unreadable calm. Captain Harris, he said finally, his tone even. Let him keep it for now. The captain's head snapped toward Marcus, eyes narrowing. With all due respect, Agent Reed, the kid humiliated you. He nearly cost lives. He doesn't deserve. Marcus cut him off with a subtle raise of his hand. He doesn't. Not yet. But sometimes the worst mistake becomes the best teacher. And I'd rather see him change than see him fired and bitter. His gaze flicked back to Mills, hard as granite. Because make no mistake, if he doesn't change, he won't last another year in that uniform. Not with me watching. The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. Harris studied Marcus for a moment, then gave a slow nod. Your call, Agent Reed. Mills' chest heaved as he realized what just happened. He wasn't off the hook, not even close. Marcus hadn't saved him. Marcus had sentenced him to something worse, accountability. As the scene wound down, Marcus gave his statement, coordinated with the backup agents who had arrived, and watched as the last of the traffickers were hauled away. His SUV sat parked on the edge of the lot, still idling, still carrying the echoes of the night's chaos. When the dust finally settled, Marcus turned to Mills, who stood off to the side, shoulders slumped, eyes glued to the ground. Marcus walked over slowly, stopping just close enough for his voice to cut through. You humiliated me. You disrespected me. You endangered those kids. But I didn't let Harris strip your badge tonight. You know why? Mills' voice was barely audible. Why? Because humiliation fades. Lessons stick. You'll never forget tonight. And I want you to live with it. Every time you see that badge, you'll remember that you almost lost it. Not because of me, but because of you. Mills blinked rapidly, fighting the sting in his eyes. He wasn't used to anyone speaking to him like this. Not his captain. Not his fellow officers. Marcus's words cut deeper than any punishment could. Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice low and firm. You're going to change, Mills. Or I'll make damn sure you never wear a badge again. That's a promise. Mills nodded quickly, his throat tight. Yes, sir. Marcus studied him a moment longer, then stepped back, his tone softening just enough to be human again. Go home. Think about what this badge really means. Then come back tomorrow ready to start over. Mills swallowed hard, nodding again. I will. Marcus turned, walking toward his SUV. The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, casting long shadows over the dock. He felt the exhaustion pressing in, but beneath it was something stronger. Resolve. The traffickers were behind bars. The kids were safe. And maybe, just maybe, one arrogant young cop had been given a shot at redemption. But Marcus also knew this wasn't over. Not for him. Not for Mills. Not for the city that kept breeding cops who saw black skin as a crime. As he slid into his SUV and pulled away, the weight of the night sat heavy on his shoulders. He knew there'd be fallout, reports to file, questions to answer, whispers about the FBI agent who'd humbled a local cop. And he knew this wasn't the last time someone would underestimate him. But he also knew this. The next time, whoever it was wouldn't just regret it. They'd remember his name. Marcus Reed, FBI. The precinct buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest the next morning. Word had traveled faster than wildfire. An FBI agent had single-handedly taken down a trafficking crew at the docks, saving a van full of kids. and a rookie patrol officer had been right in the middle of it, for all the wrong reasons. Every officer wanted details, but nobody dared to ask Mills directly. The look on his face when he walked in, pale, drained, humbled, told them enough. Marcus Reed, meanwhile, sat in Captain Harris's office, leaning back in a chair that seemed too small for the weight he carried. His badge rested on the table, gleaming in the morning light. Across from him, Harris folded his hands, his expression stiff but respectful. "Agent Reed," Harris began. "First, let me say what you did last night, rescuing those kids, taking those guys down." He shook his head. "We owe you. This city owes you." Marcus's voice was calm, measured. "You don't owe me anything. You owe them." He nodded toward the stack of files sitting on Harris's desk. Case reports, mugshots, evidence photos. Those kids, their families, the ones who slipped through the cracks before last night. That's the debt you should be paying. Harris's eyes flickered, his throat tight. He wasn't used to being lectured in his own office, but something about Marcus made it impossible to push back. This wasn't arrogance. This was authority earned. "And what about Officer Mills?" Harris asked after a pause. "I've already had the commissioner breathing down my neck about his behavior." Marcus's jaw flexed. "Mills made a mistake, a bad one, but he's not the first, and he won't be the last. The question is whether he learns or becomes another headline." As if on cue, the door creaked open and Mills stepped inside. His uniform was crisp, but his face looked like it hadn't seen sleep. He stood stiffly at attention, his voice hoarse. "Captain, Agent Reed." Marcus's eyes locked on him. "Sit down, Mills." Mills obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair like he was bracing for an execution. He glanced nervously between Marcus and Harris, then fixed his gaze on the floor. Marcus studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Do you know who I am, Mills?" "Not just the badge. The name." Mills swallowed hard. You're Agent Reed, FBI." Marcus leaned forward slightly, his tone sharper. "More than that. I'm Assistant Special Agent in charge, Counter-Trafficking Division, DC Field Office. I've testified before Congress. I've led operations across 3 states. I've buried men who worked under me because this job takes everything you have if you do it right." Mills' eyes flicked up wide. He hadn't known. Nobody had told him. He thought Reed was just another agent, maybe mid-level, maybe local. But this man was the kind whose name traveled through halls of power, the kind whose work shaped laws, the kind you didn't just disrespect, you didn't dare. Marcus's voice lowered, each word deliberate. "So when you profiled me, when you laid your hands on me, when you humiliated me on that street, you weren't just messing with another black man driving a car. You were messing with one of the most senior federal agents in this country. And you didn't even know it." The silence was suffocating. Mills' face drained of color. He looked like the floor might swallow him whole. Harris shifted uncomfortably in his chair, as though even he felt the sting of Marcus's words. "You understand what that means?" Marcus continued, his tone sharp as a blade. "If I wanted, your career would already be over. One phone call to Washington, and you'd never wear a badge again. Hell, you'd be lucky to find security guard work." Mills' throat bobbed. I understand, sir." His voice cracked with the weight of it. Marcus leaned back again, his eyes still piercing. "Good, because I don't want your career. I want your change. You've been given something most men in your shoes never get, a second chance. Don't waste it." Mills nodded quickly, his eyes stinging. "I won't, sir. I swear I won't." For the first time, Marcus's expression softened, not into a smile, but into something steadier. A quiet kind of mercy. "Then prove it. Every shift, every call, every traffic stop. Because if I hear so much as a whisper that you pulled another stunt like last night, I'll be back. And next time, I won't stop Harris from taking that badge." Mills' chest heaved as he absorbed the words, shame burning deep in his gut. Harris cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Agent Reed, I'll personally make sure Mills is put under supervision. And If you're open to it, maybe you could give a briefing to the department on what happened, on the work you do. Might open a few eyes. Marcus considered it a room full of cops who looked at men like him as suspects first and citizens second. A room full of Mills. He nodded slowly. I'll do it. Later that week, the precinct's briefing room was packed wall to wall. Officers filled every seat, leaned against walls, even stood in the back. Marcus stood at the front, suit crisp, badge shining, his presence commanding silence without a single word. Mills sat in the front row, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on Marcus like a student waiting for his teacher's judgment. Marcus spoke plainly. He didn't sugarcoat. He talked about bias, about how easy it was to abuse power when you forgot what the badge was for, about the lives destroyed when cops let fear or arrogance guide their decisions. And then he told them about the kids in the van, the crying in the dark, the look in their eyes when freedom finally came. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Not the silence of boredom, the silence of reflection. Officers shifted in their seats, some staring down, others meeting Marcus's gaze with something like respect. And when he walked out, his footsteps echoed louder than applause. Mills followed him into the hallway, his voice shaky. Agent Reed, I don't know how to thank you. Marcus turned, his expression calm, but resolute. Don't thank me. Do better. That's all the thanks I need. Mills nodded, the weight of the words pressing into him like stone. Marcus adjusted his jacket, his eyes narrowing slightly. He knew not everyone in that room would change. Some never did. But if even one did, if even Mills did, maybe that was enough. By the next morning, Marcus's name wasn't just echoing through the precinct halls. It was plastered across headlines. FBI agent foils trafficking operation in city docks. Children rescued in midnight raid. And tucked beneath those triumphs was another story gaining traction. Local cop nearly botches federal operation. The news cycle had a way of sharpening truth into spectacle. Reporters camped outside the precinct. Cameras followed Mills whenever he dared step outside. His once cocky stride was gone, replaced by quick, hunched steps as if he wanted to disappear. His fellow officers gave him a wide berth, some sneering, others whispering. His mistake had become everyone's entertainment. Inside, Marcus watched it unfold from Harris's office, arms folded across his chest. He hadn't wanted the spotlight, he'd wanted justice. But he knew the media didn't care about nuance. They loved the story of the dumb cop who messed with the wrong man. It was catchy. It sold. But behind the clicks and headlines, real lives had been saved, and real corruption still lingered. You sure about this? Harris asked, his voice low. He tapped a file on his desk. The formal complaint Marcus had the right to file against Mills. One signature from you and that kid's career is finished. No hearings, no appeals. Done. Marcus's eyes hardened. And then what? Another rookie takes his place. Different name, same story. Nothing changes. Harris sighed, running a hand over his bald head. You've got a point. But some of my men, they don't like being told they're wrong. Especially not by the Bureau. Especially not by. He hesitated. Say it, Marcus said flatly. Harris shifted uncomfortably. Especially not by a black man. The words hung heavy between them. Marcus didn't flinch. He'd heard them, felt them, lived them all his life. But hearing Harris say it aloud, acknowledging it instead of dancing around it, sparked something raw in him. That's exactly why I can't just walk away, Marcus said, his voice steady but charged. They need to hear it. They need to see it. And if it takes me standing in front of every precinct in this city until the message sticks, then that's what I'll do. Later that week, Marcus was invited, unofficially at first, to speak before a city council committee. The trafficking bust had shaken the community, and leaders wanted answers. Marcus walked into the chamber in a tailored suit, his badge clipped neatly at his belt. The room quieted the moment he entered. Mothers of the rescued children sat in the front row, clutching tissues. Reporters lined the back wall, pens ready. Agent Reed, the council chair said, "Thank you for being here." Can you tell us what happened that night? Marcus recounted the events clearly, without embellishment. He told them about the van, the children, the traffickers. He didn't hide Mills' mistake, but he didn't crucify him either. Instead, he pivoted to the larger issue: bias, profiling, the danger of arrogance behind the badge. When a child cries in the dark, waiting to be sold like property, that's where our focus should be, Marcus said, his voice steady but rising with passion. Not on pulling over law-abiding citizens because of the car they drive or the color of their skin. Every time an officer wastes energy harassing someone who looks like me, the real predators slip by. And those children pay the price. The room erupted in murmurs, some council members nodding gravely, others shifting uncomfortably. But Marcus didn't stop. This isn't just about one cop and one mistake. It's about a culture that lets mistakes like this happen every day without consequence. You want to honor those kids we saved? Don't just thank me. Change the system that almost left them behind. The chamber fell silent again, heavy with the weight of his words. Even the reporters held back, pens frozen mid-scribble. When he stepped out into the sunlight afterward, microphones swarmed. Questions flew. Agent Reed, are you calling for reform? Do you think Officer Mills should resign? What's next for you? Marcus raised a hand, his voice carrying over the chaos. This isn't about me. It's about those kids. It's about making sure no one else suffers because we're too blind to see where the real danger is. That's all I'll say. Then he walked away, refusing to feed the frenzy. Back at the precinct, Mills sat at his desk, scrolling through news articles with hollow eyes. His name was everywhere, and not in the way he'd ever imagined. He'd wanted respect, authority, recognition. Now he had infamy. He closed the laptop with trembling hands, his mind replaying Marcus's words again and again. You're going to change, or I'll make sure you never wear a badge again. For the first time in his career, Mills felt the crushing weight of what the badge truly meant. Not power, responsibility. And he realized he had no idea how to carry it. That night, Marcus drove through the city, the skyline glowing against the dark. His phone buzzed with texts from colleagues, congratulations from officials, even a message from Washington thanking him for his service. But none of it mattered. His mind kept drifting back to those kids' faces in the van, the fear in their eyes, the relief when they saw him. And beneath it all was a gnawing thought. This wasn't finished. He'd made enemies that night, not just the traffickers, but the system that thrived in silence. As he pulled up to his apartment, a black sedan idled across the street. Its tinted windows rolled down just enough for Marcus to catch the glint of a camera lens. He froze for a beat, then exhaled slowly, walking calmly inside. The consequences of his reveal were only beginning. The church basement smelled faintly of coffee and old wood polish, its folding chairs arranged in neat rows. It wasn't a courtroom, wasn't a council chamber, but to Marcus it felt heavier than both. The families of the rescued children had gathered here at the pastor's invitation, a place where they could see each other, grieve, and begin to heal. Marcus stood quietly near the back, his suit jacket folded over one arm. He hadn't planned to come. The bureau didn't require it, and agents weren't trained for moments like these. But something in his chest told him he had to. It wasn't enough to save those kids. He had to see what safety looked like on their faces. The little girl with braids, the one who had hugged him first that night, spotted him across the room. Her eyes lit up. She tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered something hurriedly. The woman turned, her face softening with gratitude when she saw Marcus. She crossed the room with her daughter, stopping just short of him. "You're the one," the mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're the one who found her." Marcus shook his head gently. "I didn't find her. She found me." He knelt down to meet the little girl's eyes. "How you doing, champ?" She smiled shyly, gripping a small stuffed bear. "Better," she whispered. Then, without hesitation, she threw her arms around his neck. Marcus held her carefully, blinking back the sting behind his eyes. He'd been trained for operations, for tactics, for survival, but nothing prepared him for the weight of a child's gratitude. "Thank you," the mother whispered again, her voice trembling. I don't know how to ever repay you. Marcus stood, his gaze steady but kind. Just love her. That's repayment enough. Around the room, other families were watching, murmuring, nodding. Some came forward to shake his hand, others to hug him. One father, his eyes red from sleepless nights, gripped Marcus's shoulder firmly. You gave us our son back. That's a debt I'll carry forever. Marcus accepted it all with quiet dignity. He didn't bask in the praise, didn't let it inflate him. He knew too well that for every child saved, there were others still waiting. That truth sat heavy in his chest, even as relief filled the room. From the doorway, Mills watched in silence. Harris had sent him, insisting he see the people this job is really about. At first, Mills had resisted, embarrassed, ashamed. But when he saw the kids, small, fragile, clinging to their parents, something cracked in him. He didn't step inside right away. He leaned against the doorframe, watching Marcus kneel down to a child's eye level, speaking softly, listening more than he talked. It was the opposite of everything Mills had thought policing was. He remembered his own stops,